I'm Jeff Pospisil, the 10-Minute Treasurer with practical advice for improving your church's financial future. In this video, I'm going to be back on the Finance Committee and talking about what financial policies they should consider adopting. And I thought I should make a quick case for this. I'd already planned to do this video, and just within the last 18 hours, I received two calls from two churches, different churches, that had this issue. You know, one of them was in the thing, we had policies and somebody's not following it. The other one is, we really need policies. So, and the reason why you need financial policies is it just gives us a common understanding about how this church handles money, how this church reports financial things, and that way it doesn't get rid of all your disagreements, but it does at least give you a common understanding. And then it also ties directly to the audit, which hopefully you also are planning on doing as well. Now, first of all, if you don't have any policies, sometimes that's an intimidating task to even start. So what I have done is I put some templates out there for both financial policies, facility policies, personnel policies. Financial policies, I've shared those with a lot of people. These are all policies that I think I stole from other churches and tried to make them somewhat generic. So go ahead and grab those if you don't have any policies, and then you can add to, delete, modify as it fits your church. But at least it gives you something to start with, because a lot of times that's the hardest part. So I'll put a link to that right in the description, but it's also under finance and benefits, finance and administrative resources. Kind of a long link, but it's there. Now, the first set of policies we need to think about is, how do we protect the money that's received? And since COVID, things have kind of changed. You know, it used to be that you just had to think about mainly the Sunday offering, because you didn't receive that many other checks or money throughout the week from any other source, or at least not a significant amount. But now with COVID, we receive money almost every day of the week, and that's a good thing in a lot of ways, but we do need to think about, how are we protecting not only Sunday offering, but also the money received in the mail and the money that's dropped off at the church office. Um, by the way, I did do a whole video on this process not that long ago, which will go a little bit more in depth, and you can get that. I'll put a link in the description for that one. So the first one is, how do we secure the offering? So on a Sunday morning, is the expectation that the money will be counted immediately and deposited? Or do we have a place where we will securely store it, lock it up, a safe of some sort, or a locked drawer? You know, and who has access to that? Who has the keys or the combination to that? So those are things to think about. Counting process. You should always have at least two counters, not from the same immediate family that are counting it. There should be a signed counter report. Somehow they need to prove that there was two counters there. And hopefully the counter report agrees with the deposit slip eventually. So also making the deposit. How often do we need to make the deposit? Who makes the deposit? Do they use one of those deposit bags? Those kind of things you should think through as well. Sometimes I remember when I was working with the state of North Dakota, as well as I've heard of other places doing this too, but sometimes when you get to a certain amount that's built up in your safe, you know, like let's say you received a bunch of donations throughout the week and you just don't feel comfortable leaving it over the weekend, then maybe you need to have a policy that says, you know, if it's over $5,000, we're going to make a deposit. So anyway, it's something to think about. And then the last one that you don't think of as a policy, but it is actually an important one, it's the donor statements. Do we put out donor statements, and how often? And this is important because a lot of times the donor is the only one that can really double check the church's records on how much they gave. So we've had cases where a donor says, hey, I know I donated $1,500 and I only have credit here for $1,200. What's up with that? Well, that could just be a problem in the records, or it could be a sign of something a little bit more serious. But either way, that ends up being an important policy consideration as well. So now we're going to look at the spending policies, which is how we care for the money as it goes out. And the first thing to think about is, how are payments approved? There's going to be some that you probably want to say these are automatically approved. So like when we remit apportionments or direct bills or salary withholdings or those designated offerings, those are automatic ones. Probably your utilities would be one of those other ones that are basically automatically approved. But then there's all these other ones that are probably not as automatic, like if somebody submits a youth expense or a worship expense, how do I know that that's okay to pay? So who has to sign off on it? That's a question. Or maybe is there a dollar limit? So maybe the youth council president can sign off on expenses up to $1,000, but over $1,000, they need approval by the finance committee or something like that. But thinking through that, how are they approved? And very closely tied to that, how is this? What kind of support do you need? So I mean, I want to see not only I want to see what was purchased, when it was purchased, how much was it, and then I want to see the approval. So whether it's an email or a signed off voucher, or maybe somebody signs off on the bill itself, I want to see that all in one place. So the next one is payroll, and and this could be also in the personnel policy, but I want I don't want to be the bad guy as the person cutting the checks. And some people will want to get paid early, or they'll want to be paid more often, or maybe whatever it is. But just set the payroll schedule. Is everybody paid semi-monthly, or maybe it's certain ones are paid monthly and some semi-monthly, or maybe everybody's paid bi-weekly. Just set the policy, and take that pressure off of me, because this is one of those sensitive areas that can cause some heartache. The travel reimbursements as well. Pastors are supposed to be reimbursed for their business miles on their personal car at the IRS rate, which is currently 56 cents per mile. But what about for volunteers or other staff? That you can set your own travel reimbursement guidelines for those positions as well, and they can be different. Then who signs checks is an important one. One of the things you need to keep in mind, this is important, is that there should never be one person that has custody of the checks, that also maintains the financial records, and is also the sole signer of the checks. So those three things, you just basically given them an opportunity, way too big of an opportunity for stuff to go wrong. So if the bookkeeper is the one signing the checks, you need two signatures, or you could just have somebody else sign it too, if not have the bookkeeper be a signer. And the last thing I think you need to think through is the credit card policies. Who gets a credit card? Who can authorize the credit cards? What kind of support? When do they need to get that in? What happens if something goes wrong with that? These are always a pain. I really dislike church credit cards. I think it's a bad idea. But if you're going to have one, actually, if you're going to have one, I just have the main office person have it, and everybody else get reimbursed. But other than that, I good luck. The last group of policies I'm just going to call nerd zone issues, and that's the ones that mainly the bookkeeper thinks about, because it's really all most of it's back office, and unless it blows up, nobody else thinks about it. But for me as a bookkeeper, I want to know the right way to do it, and I want to know that I have the authority to do it. So one of them is year end, cash versus accrual. Cash means when you receive the cash or when you pay it out, that's when the date of the transaction is. Accrual looks at when is it earned or when is it incurred. So that's quite a bit different. So one of the common ones is, what about those late donations where they put it in the mail but we didn't receive it until later? How should we record that? Do we record that in the last year? Or do we record it in the year we received it? So those are things to think about, and that would help your bookkeeper. Investment policies. So who makes investment decisions? If you're making a transfer or a deposit or a withdrawal, how does that happen? Cash management, kind of similar to this one, but just for an example, when I was a church bookkeeper, I used to have my checking account, which I kept at a bare minimum. Then I had a money market savings account, which basically held all my other excess cash. And then I had an investment account. But I used to move money in between the money market and the checking account as I needed to, keeping a minimum balance of a certain amount. So it would have been nice to know that I was authorized to do it. I just did it anyway because I don't know, I thought it was a smart thing to do, earn a little bit of interest. How do we handle donor restricted funds? And the big one here is actually when you raise money for a project. This is the biggest one for me anyway. There's those ones that are donor restricted that you just automatically pay out, but what about those ones that are for a project? Like we raise money for a to replace the carpet, and then we have a little bit left over. What do we do with that little bit left over? Are we allowed to just put it right in the general fund? Technically, you're able to do that, but sometimes we just let those hang out. It's better to decide ahead of time. What are we going to do with that little bit of leftover? What are we going to do about when somebody tries to give a designated gift towards an individual? Those kinds of things. You really shouldn't do that. So you should have a policy around that as well. If somebody wants to help somebody through the church, a specific individual. What about the annual audit? When do we do it? How do we do it? Who does it? Those kinds of things. I just did a video on that, so I'm going to put a link there as well. And then another one too is fixed assets. Do we want fixed assets on our balance sheet? A lot of churches don't. It's not a bad idea to do it. But one thing we should think about, at least, even if it's not on the official accounting records, do we have an inventory? I mean, an inventory might be a nice idea, especially if you got computers and other things that could walk away. Why not take an inventory every now and then? How often would we have to do an inventory? So those are the issues to think about there. All right, I hope that has helped. I think the templates will probably help more than even this video did, but hopefully this video broke down some of that. And I'm a little over 10 minutes, but shoot. Anyway, God bless you. This is a ministry of the Dakotas Conference and the Dakotas United Methodist Foundation. Have a good one.